I'm here in Chertsey with our speaker this evening, Dr. David Hamilton, and David's going to be talking to us about kindness and compassion. So good evening, David.
Pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you here as
Thank
well.
you.
I have a few questions for you for tonight's talk.
Fire away.
The first one is around, obviously, the subject of kindness and compassion. And I'm fascinated by a lot of the points that you've made in your book, but one of the points that caught my imagination is you make reference to how we can affect each other's moods and emotions depending on what state we're in. So if we're with somebody who's very depressed, their energy and their emotions will affect us, and in the same way as if we're with somebody who's really happy, that will also have an effect upon us. So my question really is, if you are in a room with somebody who is very depressed and you're in a state where you're feeling very upbeat and very happy, which of those two would be the stronger emotion?
Good question. I've been asked that question a lot of times.
Have you? Oh, I thought I was being original.
No, it depends. Neither happiness nor sadness, to use that term, is stronger than each other. It's whoever expresses their emotion the most. If the person who's depressed is more expressive and expresses their depression more than the happy person expresses their happiness, then eventually depression will win over, or the overall mood will tend in the direction of, if you think depression was -5 and happiness was +5, if the person was expressing depression most, then the mood would tend in the direction of negative. But if the happy person was expressing happiness more than the depressed person was expressing depression, then the mood would tend in the direction of positivity. So it's not so much whether an emotion is stronger, it's who expresses it the most.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It's like, people say that the ones with the loudest voices get heard. Well, in a similar kind of way, the one who expresses, and I mean expressing by their voice, by the body language and facial expressions, you can express emotion using your entire body. So the ones who express it the most are more contagious.
Interesting.
Regardless of what they express.
So if you had two people at a similar state, then they would probably meet somewhere in the middle.
Pretty much, yeah. You get kind of bouncing off each other. They would tend, they kind of tend towards each other. If they're equally expressive or equally non-expressive, then they just kind of gravitate in the same direction.
Oh, thank you.
You call it, I think it's called concordance. You get concordance of moods. People just tend towards a midpoint.
Oh, that's beautifully answered. Thank you, David.
There you go.
Another question that I had for you is more of a personal example, perhaps. Again, on the subject of kindness. Can you share one example with us of an act of kindness that you've made and the effect, the ongoing effect that had, the ripple effect?
Well, I do kind of lots of just small kind of random things. Let me think of something. I mean, a lot of things are kind of family orientated, so it's not so much relevant. I think you're meaning more in the world. I mean, I have put some money behind a till in a coffee shop, which I thought was quite interesting, and I sat for a few minutes. I'd said to the manager, "Can you just, pay for the next few people's coffees?" Yes. And I sat for a minute or two, and then I thought, you could see the smile on people's faces, but I didn't really want. It's funny, but I felt kind of. By watching, by checking up on it, I felt it wasn't as good as it could be, so I left and went away because I didn't want to see. So I don't really know what happened, because actually sometimes I think it's better if you don't hang around, because in a sense it felt like gratification for me, seeing a smile. Oh, that person has smiled, they're happy today because of what I did, and that felt, dishonest is the wrong word, but it didn't feel congruent with the act, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I kind of got up and left because I just didn't want to know. I thought it was the act of kindness was more powerful if I didn't need to know what the outcome was. So if you do something completely random or anonymous in that kind of way, I think it carries much more weight, because you get your own ego, that part of you out of the way that says, I need someone to be grateful for what I've done, I need to see the outcome. But actually, if you don't need to see it, you just do it because it's the right thing to do, I think it carries more weight.
Yes, and that way I guess it's more of a sense of true giving. True giving can be quiet and it just passes through.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I noticed something that I had written about, is it's important to do something really from the heart without needing any gratification, any thanks for it. And it's one of the first times I think where I'd actually experienced that when I was aware of the subject, if that makes sense.
Yes, I totally understand that, because it's almost a human desire to see the effects of our actions.
Yeah, yeah.
So it takes a lot of foresight to walk away from a situation like that, just leave it and to go.
And not need to know what the outcome is.
Yes.
Yeah. As long as you do it from the heart, you do something that's meaningful, that you think is meaningful, it can make a difference, then you really don't need to know what happens at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you feel that you need to know, then maybe that's a part of ourselves that has that need, which maybe isn't actually necessary.
Yes. And it almost dilutes your actions as well.
That's a good word, it dilutes it. Certainly, for me, it diluted it in my own head.
Yes.
And that's why I had to move. Ultimately, I think it was just in my own head. I mean, regardless of whether I was there or not, people would have benefited from it. But in my own head, it diluted it because it didn't feel like it had the same power, same meaning as if I wasn't there. So that's why I left.
In fact, the whole subject of giving is a really interesting one, because I found in my own experience that very often I'll give, and ultimately when you give, things come back. But invariably it's not from the original source. So many people have the attitude, well, I've given so much to you, why aren't you giving an equal amount back to me? Whereas in my experience, it doesn't actually work that way. It becomes a ripple effect. So you give, and that passes on and passes on and passes on. And ultimately, the gifts and the abundance do come back to you. But 9 times out of 10, it's not from where you expect them to come from.
Because we live in such, interconnected networks, and people build relationships all throughout these networks. So, and all these networks are based on cooperation. We cooperate and help each other. So when you do something